Welcome back, GED scholars. In this video, we are going to complete one of the RLA prompts together. Please remember that for the exam, you will have a portion of the RLA that will require you to type a response. You will receive two sides to the same issue, and then you have to decide after reading them which one has the stronger argument. There are 3 videos that talk about this rubric, and please visit GED.com to download the rubric, or you can visit GEDtalk.com, and I have a lot of the prompts there as well. We have to also remember that you won't actually be writing with pencil or pen, you will be typing. So if you need to work on your typing skills, please go out on the internet, search for a typing website that you enjoy. I suggest typingclub.com, so please make sure you practice your typing. So this is the first prompt that I usually have my students work on, and I tell them, do not time yourself. I know that when it's time to actually complete the exam, for this writing section, you are given 45 minutes. However, you need to practice and understand when you're reading, what are you looking for? What should you be highlighting or paying attention to? The rubric does say that you will be graded on how well you can explain which side or which essay within the prompt has that stronger argument. So we're going to do that, like I said, together in this video. If you want a copy of this prompt, please go down to the description box below and you can download it there. Or once again, go to GEDtalk.com, and under the resources tab, I have 11 writing prompts that you can practice with. So the first argument is from Representative Melody Walls, and it looks like this is a press release. So once again, we are going to read the argument, and I'm going to start highlighting what I consider to be evidence. And if you're wondering, well, how does she consider that to be evidence? It's because it's pulling on some type of information that affects what this is all about. And like I said, this is all about a highway being moved over from a town called Oak Falls. And the second argument that we'll read is a letter to the editor of a newspaper in Oak Falls from a small business owner. So I'm going to be looking for anything that I think the representative is trying to use to persuade me into believing that A, this highway is a good idea, but also B, that her press release has a stronger argument than what the business owner is sharing. So let's go ahead and get into this first paragraph. As I mentioned, I'm going to read this and highlight. I'll stop to kind of reflect on why I might have highlighted something, but because I want to make sure that this video goes at a good speed so you guys understand that, hey, you're going to be timed. You're going to need to make sure you're zoomed in, focused on what you should be looking at. There may not be an explanation. So let's go ahead and get started with this first paragraph. This bill funds the expansion of Highway 17 from a 2-lane highway to a 4-lane thoroughfare. It will positively affect the town of Oak Falls, Wall said. As part of the expansion, Highway 17 will move 2 miles east of the town of Oak Falls. The bill will ease traffic congestion and create job opportunities during and after construction. So automatically, I'm going to highlight it will positively affect the town of Oak Falls, because she's obviously trying to bring this to our attention that, hey, this is a good thing. That's why it's taking place. And then in that first paragraph, they continue on to say that the bill, the highway, which the bill is concerning, will ease traffic congestion and create job opportunities during and after construction. So I'm going to highlight that as well, because that is evidence to try to persuade me into believing that the move of this highway 17 2 miles to the east will actually benefit the town of Oak Falls. Let's continue on to the second paragraph. Last year, Representative Walls held town hall meetings to gather opinions from her constituents about revitalizing the economy in the 12th District. 2 years ago, Turnaround Motors and Bell Camera closed their factory doors. The result has been high unemployment with no immediate prospects for new businesses. Representative Walls heard residents' concerns for jobs in the district. Okay, so she held town hall meetings. So that's kind of where she's getting her information from. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that from her constituents. And if you're like, what is constituents? It's another word for voter. We also find out in this paragraph that 2 factories closed their doors. And that's a big deal for any town because it will lead to, as we see here, high unemployment. Let's move on to the third paragraph now. Improving the highway means jobs for local construction workers. Once completed, the highway will bring more long-distance travelers into the area. Some officials anticipate a 30% increase in highway traffic due to the ease of traveling on the improved Highway 17. An increase in travelers will attract national motel and restaurant chains along the highway route. These national businesses will mean permanent jobs for residents. Okay, so there's a lot happening in this paragraph. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and I want to highlight where it says, this means jobs for local construction workers. Because remember, in the second paragraph, that was one of Representative Wald's concerns that she was addressing, is that she went to these town hall meetings and people were saying the factory doors closed, we now have high unemployment, and we don't see any prospective businesses coming to do business over here. So she's saying, okay, well, if we move this highway over, first and foremost, your local construction workers will have jobs. And then she continues on to say, once completed, it will bring more long distance travelers into the area. So it doesn't necessarily say specifically to Oak Falls, but it does say it'll come into the area because they're saying that due to the ease of traveling on the improved highway, people are going to want to come. And then this statement is followed with a sentence that says some officials anticipate a 30% increase. And so that's a good thing, right? The red flag for me here is where it says some officials anticipate, which means they don't know if it's really going to take place, but they're hoping that there will be an increase in highway traffic because it'll be easier to travel on this new highway. And then it goes on to say that because there are more travelers, that national motel and restaurant chains will start popping up along this highway route and it'll bring permanent jobs for these residents. Let's continue on to the next paragraph. In the future, historical features in Oak Falls and Gaston, such as brick streets built by early settlers and the old wheat mill, will likely become popular tourist attractions. More visitors will increase business for local shops and restaurants. So now she's saying that in the future, all of the stuff that is taking place in Oak Falls and Gaston will be seen as somewhat historical, and that will draw people to your towns. It's interesting that she brings this up because there seems to be a gap of information that I'm being presented. The paragraph above it is talking about how all of these long distance travelers will be in the area and there will be national motel and restaurant chains. And then it jumps to all of a sudden that, hey, your guys' town will be historical features, as though people won't be coming to see anything else, which might be a red flag. And maybe that's why the business owner wrote a letter to the newspaper. But we'll see once we get to that argument. In this paragraph, I don't really see anything that I want to highlight, so I'm just going to continue on with this press release. The next paragraph says, the improved highway will eliminate 18-wheeler traffic through towns, a major source of traffic congestion and noise. A 2001 study in Texas showed that bypasses reduce traffic through towns by as much as 75%. Eliminating 18-wheeler traffic will also reduce road maintenance costs. Okay, once again, it's a short paragraph, but there's a lot of good information. First sentence says, the improved highway will eliminate 18-wheeler traffic through towns. Red flag for me, because this seems like it would be the last thing this town or these towns folks would want, is that there would be less traffic, seeing how they want jobs. They have local businesses. They need somebody to come into these local businesses to eat their food and purchase the gasoline that they have there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight that and just keep that in the back of my mind. It goes on to say, a 2001 study in Texas showed that bypasses reduce traffic through town by as much as 75%. So I know some of you might be thinking, okay, well, that's a good thing that this highway will reduce traffic because nobody likes traffic. But once again, what if that's where their main source of income is coming from, people who stop at these little towns when they're traveling on the highway? So I want to go ahead and I want to highlight 2001 study in Texas showed that bypasses reduce traffic. And just because I don't want to highlight too much, I'm going to skip a few words and then I'm going to highlight by as much as 75%. And yes, eliminating 18-wheeler traffic will also reduce road maintenance costs. But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to leave that paragraph the way it is, continue on, and if I come back to it, I might highlight more, but as of right now, I feel good with that paragraph. The last paragraph reads, the improvement of Highway 17 funded by federal tax allocations is an important investment in the area. So once again, not anything too big coming at us. We do see here it says funded by federal tax allocations, which does let me know then that this highway is traveling through more than one state, because we wouldn't see federal tax money being used for a state highway. So I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. So that was the first argument that we read. A little bit of information about what the whole intentions of having this highway move 2 miles to the east. They share little statistics about what they're hoping for in the future. And they also present a study, a 2001 study in Texas. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scroll down to the second argument. As I mentioned, this is a letter to the editor to the Oak Falls Gazette, which is a local newspaper, obviously. And we know that from the press release we just read, this highway moving 2 miles to the east is going to affect Oak Falls. So I'm going to pay attention definitely to what this letter has to say. In this first paragraph, it says, I am a small business owner living in Representative Wall's congressional district. A bill has been passed to expand Highway 17 from a 2-lane highway to a 4-lane thoroughfare. This change includes plans to move Highway 17 2 miles to the east, which means it will now bypass our town completely. I find this unacceptable. The first part of this paragraph, we already know because we read it in the first paragraph in the press release above. But what I do want to highlight is where in this letter it says, which means it will now bypass our town completely. So this isn't something where it's like there's a little bit of the highway that passes this town. This business owner is saying this highway is bypassing our town. It's like we're not even really on the route anymore. And they find this unacceptable. Moving on to the second paragraph. The Gazette reports that because Highway 17 runs through 6 states, so that's what I was sharing about. If there's going to be federal tax dollars, it's probably running through more than one state. But it says Highway 17 runs through 6 states. Construction will be paid for with federal road funds. That means some of our federal taxes will pay for a road that I believe will harm our town. I also believe that few residents of Oak Falls will use the road. Our town and district will lose money as a result of this highway bypass paid for by our tax dollars. So I understand the frustration about there are federal tax dollars going into a road that, if anything, will harm our town. So I don't want to highlight any of that because I don't think that's strong enough evidence. But I do want to highlight this last sentence where it says, our town and district will lose money as a result of this highway bypass, because that's a big deal. Because what the constituents were telling Representative Walz in her town hall meetings was that they needed jobs. They needed, more business in their towns. And this business owner is saying, hey, if this takes place, Highway 17 is going to pass our towns, and not just the town of Oak Falls, but the district will lose money because of this as well. Let's continue on. The road construction jobs are only a temporary bandage for the wounds made by our 2 manufacturers closing their doors. Once the road construction is finished, only minimum jobs will remain. Remember, Representative Walz is saying because of this highway, they'll have more construction jobs. But this business owner brings to our attention that, well, once the construction is done, they're not going to have jobs, and all they'll have are minimum wage jobs because of those motels and national chain restaurants opening up on the highway. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that last sentence. Moving on. In fact, the highway will bypass 4 cities in our district alone. Each of these towns will lose business because fewer travelers will pass through them and eat, stay overnight, or purchase gas. There is no guarantee that tourists will drive an extra 2 miles into our town if national chain motels and restaurants are built at the highway exits. The 2001 study Representative Walz references does show that bypasses reduce traffic and noise in towns, but the study also shows that they have a negative impact on local businesses. Wow. A paragraph filled with a lot of information. This business owner is sharing concerns, as I had mentioned earlier, that if this highway is 2 miles from this town or from any of the towns, not just Oak Falls, people are most likely not going to travel an extra 2 miles just to go stay at a local, bread and breakfast or to eat at a local restaurant when there are already restaurants on the highway and it's right there. They don't need to travel very far from the highway. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to highlight each of these towns will lose business because fewer travelers will pass through them. And we also know that too because in Representative Walz's press release, she talks about how there will be a 75% chance decrease in traffic in 18-wheelers. And those are the folks that stay overnight, purchase gas, eat at those restaurants as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump to this last sentence because this is interesting. The same study that Representative Walz references is used by this author to show that, hey, there's a little bit more to that study that wasn't shared with you guys. Yes, it's true that the bypasses reduce traffic and noise in towns, but the study also shows they have a negative impact on local businesses. I want to highlight that because remember, one of the concerns of the constituent was that they don't have business, they don't have jobs, and that's a big deal to them. And she is saying, well, if with this highway, People will most likely be willing to show up to the area because it's easier to get through. However, it's also neglecting the fact that people aren't going to be coming into these towns because who wants to drive an extra 2 miles to get to a town? The last paragraph says, if this project were paid for with state tax money alone, angry voters would have struck it down. Representative Walls held town hall meetings to hear residents' opinions about the local economy, but obviously she did not listen to the concerns they voiced. Please consider local concerns about this federal project. I don't see much in this that I want to highlight for text-based evidence. There isn't much that is being represented to me. So this is the second argument that we read. And as you can tell, there wasn't much that we saw being provided by the business owner other than their own speculation. And it seems like a lot of feelings are in this. So what I want you to do is please go ahead and pause this video, reflect on what we just read, and think to yourself that if you had this as your prompt, after reading both sides, which one do you think has the stronger argument? And please remember that the stronger argument may not be the side that you agree with, and that's okay. You have a task, and that is to read both arguments. And once again, who has the stronger argument? Who is providing you text-based evidence? Once you figure that out, go ahead and start up this video again, and we are going to type our response. So hopefully you paused the video and you reviewed the highlights. If you wanted it to take notes, I absolutely encourage that when you're practicing. Please remember that when it comes to test day, you will not be able to write on your screen. However, you will have scrap paper, so you can take notes on scrap paper if it helps you get your thoughts organized, because you want to be able to create somewhat of an outline, whether it's in your mind or on paper, on how you're going to use the highlighted information in your response. And if you are struggling to think about, well, how would I structure this response? Please remember, I do have a template. You can find it by going to gedtalk.com, and on the resources tab, I have that template there for you. So as you can see on the left side of the screen, I have the template open, and on the right side of the screen is the first argument. And if you are wondering, is there a correct response? Is there a correct side that you can say is stronger than the other? I believe there is. I have heard in webinars for trainers and for teachers that there isn't a stronger side. It's just how the student responds, how you structure your response, how you use the text-based evidence to say that one argument is stronger than the other. I, however, in the 11 prompts that I have found and used to teach my students how to complete this task, always find a stronger side. So for this taxation and revenue prompt, I firmly believe Representative Melody Walls has the stronger argument than the business owner, because as we can see in the response from the business owner, we didn't highlight any information that he or she is bringing to the table, but instead they seem to be objecting to what Representative Walls said in her press release. So what I would want to do for my response is to focus on what Representative Walls mentions, because she does have a number of strong points that we want to pay attention to and bring up when we claim that she has the stronger side. And I'm going to actually try to see if there's anything that she says that I can counteract what the other argument is making. So going back over to the template really quickly, let's just take a sneak peek to see what kind of structure we have. So the first paragraph at the very top, it says, although passage number, and you don't have to necessarily refer to the passages by the full title, because once you set it up where you can say in the first passage or passage 1, the press release by Representative Melody Walls, and then through the rest of the response, you can just be like, oh, well, in passage number 1, this is what was said, and then passage number 2. It's kind of like when you want to introduce the abbreviations for a company name or something, you first introduce the full name, then you put the abbreviation. So for example, and obviously most people know if you were to say the FBI, but if you introduce it in the first paragraph, you would say the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's what you would write the full name out, and then in parentheses you would write FBI. So this is kind of the same concept, where just in that first paragraph, set it up so it's obvious which passage you're talking about. So it says, although, and then you would put passage number, and you would, for this first one, you put in the one that has the weaker argument, makes some good points, ultimately passage number that has the stronger argument, best supports its position because or by, then you would state reasons number 1, number 2, number 3. You might get a prompt where there's only one good reason or there's only 2 good reasons. And so you want to just be mindful of that, and that you need to use that text-based evidence to build this argument that you're making, that, hey, side A is stronger than side B. In this first paragraph too, you're going to write the bare minimums, because in the rest of the response, that's when you're going to elaborate. So for this first paragraph, I would write, although passage number 2, which is from the Oak Falls small business owner, makes some good points, ultimately, passage number 1, the press release from Representative Melody Walls, has a stronger argument. So then knowing that, what I would do is, and I would suggest that you don't type on the actual template itself, but to open up a Word document and type it there. So I'm going to go ahead and open one that is side by side. So then I can go ahead and start typing away for this first paragraph and write, although passage 2, the letter to the Oak Falls editor, makes some good points, ultimately, passage number 1, the press release from Representative Walls, best supports its position because, and then we would go ahead and we would state the reasons. So let me go ahead and reduce that screen and come back, because I want us to pay attention to why her argument is stronger. The first thing that we read is that this is something that has to do with a highway that's moving 2 miles east of a town. And she says in that first paragraph, it's going to ease traffic congestion and create job opportunities. Those are the 2 reasons we have to fight with. Those are the 2 reasons we are going to include in our response to show why her argument is stronger than the second argument from the business owner. We already know off the bat that those are the 2 things that we're going to look at, and that it is what we highlighted. So we already know exactly where to go to find text-based evidence to present in our response. I'm going to go back to my response. We're going to fix that because it's driving me crazy. So we're coming back and we're going to include those 2 reasons in this first paragraph. So it says, although passage 2, the letter to the Oak Falls editor, makes some good points, ultimately passage number 1, the press release from Representative Walls, best supports its position because it not only addresses the job need in the towns, but also addresses traffic congestion. Okay, so those are the two reasons that we have to work with. So we're going to go ahead, and that's the intro that we're going to present right now. Please remember that within the 45 minutes you are given to complete the prompt, you want to make sure that you save a minimum of 5 minutes at the end to edit. And I can already tell you that I want to go into this first paragraph and start editing. There are things that I want to change because I know that it'll sound better once I edit. For example, you see this right here, job need. That should be unemployment. That sounds better, and it shows them that you know vocabulary. I'm just letting you know that you need to save a minimum of 5 minutes towards the end so you can edit and go through and check punctuation and to check word choice as well. But when you are writing, do not do that. Don't return to the paragraph that you just finished to edit right afterwards. You want to go ahead and complete everything. Make sure you save that 5 minutes and go ahead and edit at the end. You'll see in the template that the second paragraph in the margin says optional intro. There are times where prompts have popped up where the stronger side is really stronger because of who wrote it or who is speaking. They have a lot of authority on the topic. But if you find yourself with a prompt where you're like, wow, this person has a lot of authority to speak on this topic, know that that's something that you can include in your response as evidence as to why they even have that stronger argument. So for this prompt, we're not going to include that because although Representative Walz did hold those town hall meetings, the authority isn't really there to say that her word is the final word. So we're not going to include that optional intro in our response. The next paragraph, which would be our second paragraph, says in passage number, the author states reason one. And remember, now we're talking about, and I don't know if you can tell, hopefully if you downloaded the prompt, you can tell the weaker passage is in gray and the stronger passage is in black in the template. So it says in passage number, and ours would be 1. So in passage number 1, the author, and instead of writing author, we're going to say Representative Walz states, and then we would talk about reason number 1. She supports this claim by presenting, and then we're going to start mentioning the pieces of evidence that we have. And I always suggest to my students that they get really specific and they say where that evidence was found. And you'll see me typing that out once we get back over to this Word document. The template says elaborate on how this is valid evidence and how it supports reason number 1. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We're going to pull this evidence and we're going to show this is why her argument is stronger than the other side. It continues on to say, on the other hand, in passage number 2, they mention, and we're going to bring up this reason because remember, in passage number 2, the business owner doesn't bring us any new information. If anything, they're just piggybacking off of what was written in this press release. So we're going to bring that up. In passage number 2, they mentioned reason 1 in paragraph number, but lack to provide evidence by, and we're going to share how they try to get you to believe that what they're saying is valid. It goes on in the template to read, if the weaker passage addresses this reason too, but does not have valid evidence, bring it up. Pit the passages against one another. Okay, GED scholars. So what I'm about to do now is I'm going to start typing the response. I know I shared the template with you, and the template is for those of you who are struggling on how you should structure your response. So I'm not going to really be using everything that I see in that template. However, I am going to make sure that I am using text-based evidence to respond, because we want to make sure that we are doing what the rubric shares we need to do for this response in order to get as many points as possible. If you haven't already checked out the rubric, please go ahead and go to GED.com, search for the rubric, or you can download it from the description box below. And please don't forget that I have videos on the rubric as well. So as I mentioned, for this section, you are going to watch me type this response. If you are not great when it comes to typing, please make sure that you work on your typing skills, because that's what you're going to do for the actual GED exam. So if you're ready, let's get into this.